What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our fast-growing YouTube channel, it's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me, as he always does, for another episode of the UNC Basketball Show, second episode, I should say, of the UNC Basketball Show, our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And, AJ, we're here to talk a little Carolina hoops. It was a difficult weekend for the Tar Heels, not only in basketball and football as well, obviously losing to NC State, but Carolina coming back 1-2 in the Phil Knight Invitational, win over Portland and losses to Iowa State and number 18 Alabama. We're recording this on Monday evening, so this one had that game on Sunday evening. So still a bad taste in Carolina's mouth and a lot of fans' mouths as well. As if you've been on Twitter, you know it's not a very happy fan base right now from what they've seen over the last three games. So, AJ, obviously you weren't there. All of us were here for the NC State game, so we weren't there, but we obviously covering the games remotely and doing our best to kind of figure out what the issues have been with the Tar Heels. So I think looking at the Alabama game, there's just a lot of things you could talk about, but down the stretch, a team that just couldn't find a way to win and make things happen. But I think it's a little bit deeper than that in terms of some of Carolina's issues. So AJ, we're not going to go too long on this podcast. It'll be a little bit shorter one than you usually do, because obviously we could sit here and talk for hours about Carolina. But from what you've seen over the last three games, close win over Portland, losses to Iowa State and Alabama, what are your thoughts on Carolina and kind of where they're at right now? Because it is a team that I think we're a little bit surprised. Maybe they lost two games, and with what's coming up, it's even bigger challenges coming up, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But what are your just thoughts on what you've seen and what have you learned from the Tar Heels from those three games out in Portland?
When I was a kid, I grew up in Northern Virginia, right along. If anybody's ever been to George Washington's house in Mount Vernon, I grew up right near there, like a mile and a half away from there.
Nice.
Potomac River. And when we were teenagers, we used to go across the parkway over some wooded areas over by the Potomac River at night. And we would just kind of split up and then see how long it would take for everybody to sort of find each other again.
Oh, that's cool.
And what I'm thinking about, and the reason I'm bringing this up is I get the impression by watching them play that they're there. The team is where I was. Mm-hmm. It was the high grass wooded area. It wasn't just dense woods. It was all kinds of stuff. I'm sure we had snakes, all kinds of crap around there.
Oh God, yeah, you don't even want to know.
Moles running around, all kinds of stuff, right? And you're right off the Potomac River, so goodness knows what was there. My point is that it took a while, and there were times where you get scared and you're like, oh man, where are my friends? But you eventually meet up, right? I get the impression watching them play that they're all just in different places. They're there on the court, on that little half of the court, and they're going in transition, but they're just, each of them, their games are in different places. One's way over here, one's way over there, one's way over there, and that kind of thing. And they're trying to find each other, and it's dark out. They need some light. And I think perhaps part of that is having the cage shaken up a little bit. I believe that the cage was rattled this weekend, and it might need some more rattling, because Hubert has spoken about this about 10, 12 days ago. He said, look, it's almost like they're trying to recreate, trying to go back and find that, and they can't. That season's over. That team is in the books. This is a new team, new season, new everything. And as much as they started the season with all these amazing aspirations as individuals and as a team, right now they have to kind of sit back and say, wait a minute, nothing's guaranteed. Just because we made a run doesn't mean anything. Look at UCLA 2 years ago. They made a run, one of the great Final Four games of all time. They lost to Gonzaga, and then last year they struggled. They were a 4 seed, and Carolina beat them in the Sweet 16, but they never became the team people thought they would become, even though they had all those guys back. Carolina's in danger of having that happen to them until all those guys that are wandering in that field, until the sun comes up and there's some light and they can find each other and congregate to the same space and then be a basketball symphony, if you will. That's what it's going to take. And they're not that team right now. They're not that team offensively. I do think they've been pretty solid defensively with a lot of stuff. They left way too many open threes to Alabama, but I think that they're early in the year, they're a little bit better defensively than they've been a lot of times early in the year in the past. But offensively, they're kind of a mess. They only have they had 13 assists against Bama, and they attempted, I think, 77 shots.
Yeah, it's just not good enough.
60 minutes of basketball. They have more turnovers than assists this season. They're only averaging like 11.4 assists a game. Lots of dribbling, lots of shooting, lots of shots being taken that you can get later on in the shot clock. Not great awareness, and they look very wobbly offensively. They look very disjointed. I asked the disjointed question after the JMU game to a couple guys, and they immediately refuted it. But what I've seen through 7 games, other than a few stretches, is a highly disjointed offense. So they have to connect. And I think the 4 returning guys have to connect before Nance fully connects with them. Because he has to join them. They're not going to join him. He has to join them, but they're not who they were, and they're not who they should be yet. So it's really hard for him to sort of immerse himself into whatever that's going to be, that ingredient to the recipe. So that's kind of what they are. Rebounding's not been good. They're still right now, they're -8 on the season on offensive rebounds. And it's not like they're shooting 58%, so there aren't that many opportunities. The opponents are grabbing around the same percentage or a little higher percentage of their misses as Carolina is. Last year, they were number 2 defensive rebounding team in the country. So they're allowing a lot of offensive rebounds, and they're not grabbing a lot themselves. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to get worked out, and we can get into a couple other elements as we go on. But they have a chance to be great. They have a chance to win the national championship. All that stuff can still happen. But they got a lot of fixing to do. They got a lot of meshing to do.
Yeah, and it's early, so you kind of expect that in some ways. And again, I think they will figure it out. And I broke down some of the stats from the 3 games in Portland, and looking at it, they shot 45% from the floor, 33% from 3. This is North Carolina. Out rebounded their opponents 129-110. But like you said, it's a team that currently ranks number 43 nationally in rebounds per game. That's not something you associate with North Carolina. Usually in the top 10. Heck, they're usually in the top 5. So that's been a struggle as well. And on the flip side, Carolina shooting 45% from floor. Opponents shot 43% from the floor, and Carolina shot 33% from 3. On the flip side of that, your opponent shot 41% from 3. So even statistically looking at it, it's not like this is major difference where you're like, okay. And I think that speaks testament to, like you said, I think Carolina has done some nice things defensively, but again, 33% from 3, that's a struggle, especially when you look at Caleb and Love and RJ Davis. So the guys taking a majority of your shots, and they're shooting either in the low 30s or mid 20s from 3-point land. So those guys have struggled to put the ball in the basket from deep as well. So AJ, I know there's a lot of different ways. And again, we're not going to go too long on this one, but I want to ask you about late game issues, because I think that's where a lot of Carolina fans' minds are at right now. When you look at the Iowa State and look at the Alabama games with how those kind of ended up going down. So for me, there's been issues with shot selection at times, decision-making. Rebounding's obviously been an issue. I thought Alabama just grabbed so many rebounds. It felt like I don't know what the stats were, but in overtime especially, it just felt like they were getting a majority of the rebounds, especially offensively. So what do you make of some of those late game issues? And I'd even put it down to some questionable coaching things at times. I'm not trying to bash anybody, but I think there have been some things that Hubert Davis can be, and not only him, as the staff as a whole, can be questioned about, especially with kind of the lack of bench rotation that we've seen. Because you put out a stat saying that, Carolina's like second to last nationally in terms of bench usage, which I think when you look at the talent on that roster, that's a bit of a surprise too. So what do you make of those late game issues and kind of that lack of bench rotation?
I think you heard them in the Alabama game.
Mm-hmm.
Alabama had 3 reserves that played around 18 minutes each. They looked a little fresher late. Carolina had a stretch in the late second overtime going into the third where 6 straight shot attempts were layups. Mm-hmm. They made 5 of them. They took 11 shots the rest of the game, and 10 of them were jump shots from 12, 14, 15 feet and 3-pointers and longer and 3-pointers. They weren't getting to the rim anymore. Caleb says, I want to go downhill. Couldn't get downhill. He was tired, played 57, 58 minutes. They were tired. And I think one of the reasons Pete Nance came in and had some success late in the game, he played the last 6 minutes, if you include the last minute of the third overtime and the whole fourth overtime, is because he had sat.
Yeah,
he picked up a third foul and sat a lot in the first half, and he got his 4th foul 2.5 minutes into the second half and then sat. He played 1 minute, like at the 8.5 minute mark, came out, didn't play again until the third overtime. But he was fresh. He blocked that shot at the end of the third overtime. Quinton Lee shot. He was fresh. Armando wasn't as fresh anymore. You could see it. But I don't think it's a winning scenario to try to give guys rest at the end of games in a situation like that with Armando. I think that was part of the deal there. Armando was just gassed. Mm-hmm. You got to give him rest earlier. We talk about with Mac all the time in football. They say we got to get guys on the field like in the second quarter. limit the snaps. If you could trim 5 snaps in the first quarter, 5 snaps in the second quarter, and a few in the third quarter, suddenly if you're in the last 8 minutes of a football game, your linebackers and your defensive ends have played 13 fewer snaps than maybe they would have if they just stayed on the field. They're going to be a little bit fresher. Same thing applies to basketball. So Puff played a lot of minutes because Nance had foul trouble. It wasn't because Hubert said, well, Puff's the guy today. Now, it eventually got that way because Puff played well. He did a lot of things, and maybe he was a better guy to have on the floor against a real bouncy team like Alabama. But I do think that the bench usage is an issue, especially because Hubert kept telling us all along that they're deep. They have a lot of talent. Oh, Dontrez is going to help us this year. Justin's going to help us this year. Tyler's going to help us this year. Well, Dontrez played Sunday for the first time. He missed 3 straight games. Didn't play 3 straight games, DNPs. Yeah. Tyler Nickel hadn't played in the last couple of games. They needed some shooting. They were getting shots, but they needed some shooting. He's supposed to be a shooter. I do think Hubert made a great substitution when he put Trimble and McCoy in defensively on that inbound, and Trimble got the steal. That was a Dean Smith moment for Hubert right there. That really was. Dean used to make those kind of substitutions, and it worked so often. So Hubert had that moment. So he's got to use the bench more. I just don't see it. The guys he brought in need to be good enough to play against Portland's reserves. They need to be good enough to play against anybody's reserves. He brought them in. A lot of them. A lot of those guys on the bench, he brought them in. So he has to be able to trust those guys and allow them to make the starters better, because all those missed shots, Carolina was 10 for 32 over the last 27 minutes of playing time of the game. So that's 7 minutes left in the second half. Caleb and RJ were 3 for 19 outside of layups. Carolina was. Caleb and RJ missed a lot of those shots. They're spent. Absolutely spent. So, and they're going to play a team Wednesday night that has 10 guys averaging double-figure minutes. It's going to be in their building. It's an old building. I've been in there before. They got to turn the heat up a little bit. That place is going to be frothing at the mouth. It's going to be a zoo, and they're a physical bunch. They're going to try to wear them down. I mean, you hear Bill Walton on TV saying North Carolina has no bench. Like, what? Well, Hubert Davis told me they do. They told us they do a bunch of times. Yeah. So they got to get through some stuff. They're going to be fine in the end. I do want to see him play more of the bench, simply because I want to see what those guys could do. I want to see how that affects the starters getting all those minutes. And I like to see a team grow and develop. And I think when you're adding parts and subs are coming in and they're expanding their roles, that's a fun thing to cover. That's an interesting thing to cover. You can go back to the Iron 5 in March if you want. But if he's going to try to do Iron 5 now, they're not going to last till March. So that needs to change. A lot of stuff needs to change. But the thing is anybody that's watched these guys know that they can do it. They should be better than they were a year ago. Armando has looked really good in stretches, but not like the kind of guy we expected. Caleb's got to stop. I mean, it seems like he's trying to play for more than just that moment. And he can't. He's got to lose himself in the game. I think RJ's done a pretty good job. Leakey's done a really good job. Leakey, to me, has been the one guy in the team that's played well above expectations, and he's second on the team in three-point shooting. I think he leads the team in field goal shooting. He's a smart player. His shot's a little different. I stood right behind him a couple of times in warmups already this year watching him shoot, and I ran a video on Twitter of it, and his shot looks a little different. He says, yeah, it's a little different. So I think they're going to be really good eventually. They're going to be the team I think a lot of people thought they would be, but they're going to have to take a different course getting there than anybody expected a few weeks ago.
Again, yeah, agreed. And they're going to have some tests over the next week in particular that we're going to even know more about this team because of who they're going to face off against. So before we dive into looking ahead real quick, AJ, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor on this podcast, the Rogue Shop. If you guys have been watching us for a while, you know who they are. You know we absolutely love them. I'm really excited to continue to partner with them. Check them out, rogueshop.com, specializing in top shelf, family-grown hemp products, CBD, Delta-8, Delta-9, tinctures, oils, gummies, candies, creams, whatever you like, whatever form you like, and you want to use these products, they've got it for you. And it's high quality, again, family-grown products. It's really, really good stuff. And I'm not just saying that. I know people in my family use them. I know AJ's used the cream. I've used the cream. My fiance loves the cream. I mean, everybody's ranting and raving about these products, not only because we love them not only because they're our sponsor, but we love them because these products are high quality. I'm not just saying that. They really, really are fantastic. So check them out, rogueshop.com. Make sure you use that promo code TARHEELS10 to save on your next order as well. Big shout out to the Rogue Shop. Again, link to their website is in the description below. So AJ, we're going to wrap this one up here in a couple minutes, but let's look ahead real quick. Coming up, ACC Big Ten Challenge at number 10 Indiana, undefeated Indiana, Wednesday night, 9:15 p.m. tip-off. AJ will be there in the December 4th matchup at 6-1 at the moment. Virginia Tech to open ACC play. That game is on 3 p.m. on December 4th. So, again, we're going to know a lot more about this team over the next couple games. And to be honest, AJ, it wouldn't surprise me in some ways if they lost both. I don't expect them to win in Indiana. I think that's just going to be too big of an ad. I think this team can win big games. They've proven they can do that. And looking at last year's team, there's a lot of parts back. Now, this year's team hasn't proven that yet, but I do think they have the parts to be able to go into Indiana, really tough environment against a good team and pull out a win, although I don't expect it based on what we've seen over the last couple games. And I think that Virginia Tech game is going to be really tricky as well. So what are your thoughts on kind of kind of similar to last week's question, we talked about the challenges that await. What are your thoughts on the challenges that once again await North Carolina on the road against, again, two really quality opponents?
Yeah, Indiana's going to be tough.
Whew, yeah, it is.
Trace Jackson Davis is really good.
Mm-hmm.
He's a really good player inside. He's going to try to get Armando in foul trouble. If Pete's on him, Pete in foul trouble. He's pretty good at bully ball, but he's got some finesse. And he's a veteran guy who's just, they love him there. You know, if you could become a beloved Indiana player, that's something you got for life.
Yeah.
And Xavier Johnson is a name that some Carolina fans might remember. He used to be the point guard at Pitt. And he left a messy situation there. And his reborn as a college basketball player at Indiana. He's a really good player. They're deep. They're more athletic than Indiana has been in the past. Mike Woodson's the head coach, second-year guy like Hubert, had an NBA background. He played in the NBA. He was a really good NBA player, but he also was a long-time assistant coach in the league. Had a lot of coaching experience in the league. So Indiana looks a lot different in the way that they play than what people are used to seeing over the course of time. So it appears that Indiana basketball is maybe trending back to where it was through most of the years that I grew up watching basketball, when that was one of the top programs in America. It's going to be a difficult game for Carolina because the team they're playing. It's going to be a difficult game for Carolina because what they're coming off of, they're shaking a little bit. And this is not actually the kind of obstacle that you want to have to hurdle while trying to get right. And it's going to be a very difficult atmosphere at Assembly Hall. So I think the challenge is significant. I would be surprised if the Tar Heels win this game. If they lose and they're 5-3, the world isn't ending. They got to go to Blacksburg. I think that's going to be a tough one too. It would not shock me if we're sitting here doing a pod next Monday and they're 5-4. And it maybe long-term, it's the best thing to happen to them. That's what a lot of people are telling me. Hey, well, you know what? They need to lose. It's good for them. It'll bring them back to earth and all that kind of stuff. I have no idea. I believe coaches when they say, I think a close win's a lot better than any losses. But maybe this group's an exception. Maybe they needed that. Maybe they need to understand your way's not working. Let's do these things. And maybe everybody has to do a little self-examination. But as you noted a few minutes ago, it's November.
Yeah, it's early.
These guys clanked into walls a lot last year. So they know how to clank into walls and recover. So there's no reason to think that they won't. But I think that Indiana's a tough task. Virginia Tech's a tough task too. Castle's going to be a hornet's nest. But I think it's a much more manageable task. I think that their size will be an issue in that game. And Caleb and RJ, I remember Caleb last year. I thought one of the most important games last year was the win that they got in Blacksburg a few days after Pitt beat them, and Caleb just wanting the ball late, hitting those 6 free throws in the last minute. And I thought that was Caleb taking a step toward becoming the guy that he was in Philly against UCLA and the guy he was against Duke in New Orleans. I think that afternoon was huge in that part of their process last year. So maybe they use that as a similar launching point this year as well.
Agreed.
Or maybe they launch in Bloomington. That would be amazing. That would be a great win for them because they just dropped more than any team. They fell more in one poll from being number one than any team in AP history.
17 spots, yeah.
Yeah, so
crazy.
Hey,
They needed
they've
that.
got a lot.
Needed that.
They've suddenly gathered a lot of fuel, right? I would think.
Agreed. I think so.
I think
maybe the pressure of not being, I don't know if there is a pressure, I'm just speculating, but the pressure of being number one, not only being number one, but being North Carolina, it's even a bigger target on your back. Maybe that bodes well for North Carolina a little bit. And, maybe teams take them a little bit lightly than they should because, of how they've struggled in the last couple of games. So you wouldn't think so.
My brother's an IU grad. He went to Indiana, and he told me that people on the Indiana message boards that he was on are all ticked off because they wanted Carolina to win.
No, of course they did.
Number one, so they could beat number one Carolina. But let me remind people something. The last redemption effort at North Carolina was the 2016-17 team. They played at Indiana in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, got waxed.
Yeah, annihilated, yeah.
And then 4 months later, they won the national championship.
Yeah. Again, I'm a firm believer. You don't want to be the best team in November. It's good if you can be the best team in November and keep it through April. That's awesome, but that doesn't usually happen in college basketball. So if there's any time to be hot, you don't want to be what
they've been. They've been underwhelming in every game. Even
agreed.
The JMU game, they were really good in the first half, and then they were underwhelming for 10 minutes, really bad for 10 minutes. So they've been underwhelming all year. So I don't think anybody's confusing them with the best anything right now.
No doubt about it.
That's what. Okay, I'm speaking from an unemotional position here, Jacob. That's what should excite Carolina fans because you got to figure that the bottom has dropped out. They've already hit rock bottom in November. So if they spring forward and continue springing forward, where does that put them in March? I think it puts them where people thought they were going to be in March. But maybe they go in there with a little more of a chip because of how things have played out already. Who knows? We'll see.
Agreed. We'll see what happens on Wednesday. And again, AJ will be there. It'll be a fun one to watch. And I know Carolina fans are hoping they can win that one, but it's going to be a tough ask. So we'll see what happens. Big games, big challenges coming up, and obviously a Carolina team that's struggling a little bit right now. But I think, like we've talked about in this podcast, they're going to ultimately be fine and probably look back on this part of the year here in a few months and be in some ways maybe glad it happened because it might shape them as a team and help them kind of learn what they need to improve on. So again, we'll see what happens on Wednesday night in Indiana. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another episode of the UNC basketball show. A little quicker one on this one. We didn't go 40 minutes as we typically do, just to look back and look ahead real quick. And obviously we'll be doing some more of these over the next couple of weeks as well after Carolina's next 2 games. So make sure you keep it locked to TarHeelIllustrated.com. Like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell as well. And real quickly, check out Rogue Shop. RogueShop.com. Link is in the description below. Make sure you use that promo code TarHeels10 to save on your order. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks.